Hey everyone, welcome back, and this is part 2 of Domain 1, where we're going to cover security governance. So when we talk about security governance, can't talk about it without talking about security policy. And security policy is going to be created, implemented, and enforced by the security organization. A lot of times these policies are either written by the CISO themselves, or they are written by a team, whether it's in governance risk compliance, GRC, or it could be in InfoSec, but the security organization is going to write a security policy. And there's going to be multiple security policies within a security organization. But one example of a policy could be something like encryption. And in the case where the security organization writes the encryption policy, the business is then going to be charged with ensuring that it aligns to that security policy. So the strategy, the goals, the mission, the objectives should all align to that security policy. So as the example with encryption, if the encryption policy states that data at rest, PII, personally identifiable information at rest, should be encrypted, then the business will need to ensure that its strategy, its goals, its mission, and objectives all align to ensure that data at rest, PII data at rest, is encrypted. So policy is the high-level document. It's going to say or tell the what. What does the organization need to do? As the example I mentioned with encryption, it's going to state that data at rest, PII data at rest, needs to be encrypted. But that doesn't really tell you how that should be done. And that's where these other documents come into play, the standards, the baselines, the guidelines, and the procedures. So a standard is going to be more specific about the policy. So the policy says that you need to use encryption with data at rest, PII data at rest. The standard might say that you need to use symmetric encryption with a certain key strength. And so that's more specific, it's required, and it states that how the encryption should occur. Baselines are also going to be a little bit more around the type. It's the minimum type of security controls that need to be applied in a system in order to adhere to that policy. So there may be certain configurations or certain settings that need to be in place as part of that baseline to ensure that the policy is adhered to. The guideline is going to provide more information around the standards and the policy, but it's not required. So it's a little bit more like providing extra information, but again, it's not required. It's giving you guidance on how to implement the standard and the policy. And then procedures are going to be a very detailed step-by-step. Here's how you do something. Now, for instance, maybe in the encryption case, there may be a case where the procedure is going to tell you how to create asymmetric key pairs using OpenSSL. So those are some examples of the documents that align to the security policy and help an organization really be able to implement that policy. So let's talk a little bit about planning. So when we talk about strategic planning as it comes around those implementing the policies and things like that, is that the security organization is going to have several different ways that it's going to tackle that planning. There's going to be strategic level planning, there's going to be tactical planning, and operational planning. The strategic planning is going to be more long-term. It's going to be more vision-oriented and more big item goals. So these are long-term. They're measured in years. You can think of things like roadmaps. Those are strategic planning. Tactical, on the other hand, it's going to be a little bit more midterm. It's going to have a little bit more detail than the strategic planning. And it may be something like projects, different hiring needs. Those are going to be part of that tactical planning. And then the last one here is going to be operational, which is more short-term, very detailed plan. And it's going to be for a much shorter period of time, maybe weeks or several months. But those are the ways, each one of these, whether it's a strategic plan that's more like a roadmap, whether it's tactical plan that's going to be more around projects and acquisitions and hiring, and the operational one where it's the short term, it's going to be very, very specific, detailed. Those are all ways that the organization is going to try to adhere to the policies that are being developed. So what about the organization? So In a typical security organization, the CISO or the CSO, so Chief Information Security Officer or the Chief Security Officer, most likely will be reporting to the CIO or even the CEO. But in some level, the CISO is going to report to some senior leader. And you want to be able to have that type of separation from other organizations so that the security organization can really be autonomous and provide oversight on the other groups. And so if a CISO is embedded in perhaps another team that doesn't have direct reporting line to the senior leader, then you may run into some issues where either the CISO is not regarded well with their peers or within the organization. But you want to make sure that CISO has a clear line of communication with senior leadership in order to make sure that the security of the organization is taken seriously. And then information security sits underneath of that CISO. And information security is a broad term there. There's a lot of different parts of information security, whether it's related to, product security or security operations center or the typical risk assessment and documentation and policy. All that stuff sits below the CISO in that information security ecosystem. But the CISO, their role is focused on making sure that the risks are properly managed within the organization. So therefore, again, you want to make sure that CISO has a clear line of sight to senior leaders and that the security organization has proper oversight of the other components of the organization. So there's other roles that are part of the organization as well. These are roles like senior managers, and these are all security type roles that could be underneath that information security or within that information security organization. So you have senior managers. These are the ones that are able to support and sign off on security policies, and they are responsible for the security of the organization. You have security professionals. These are the ones that are doing the actual implementation work. You have asset owners who are classifying information. So, looking at data that's part of the organization and making sure that it has the right protection based on its classification. You have custodians who implement the protection defined within the security policy. You have users, and these are the people that have access to any kind of secured systems. And then you have auditors who are the ones that are reviewing and verifying that the security policy is being implemented appropriately. Another thing we'll talk about here is security control frameworks. So we're going to talk a bit about security control frameworks here coming up in other parts of this course. But just to be aware that there are several different types of control frameworks. COBIT is a very popular one. NIST 853 is a very popular one as well. Center for Internet Security, NIST Risk Management Framework, and the CSF, which again, we're going to talk about those later. ISO has 2700 as well as some other standardization frameworks that we'll cover in a bit. And then ITIL, Information Technology Infrastructure Library. All of these they're not necessarily security. Some of them are, but not all of these are necessarily security control frameworks. But they do definitely play a role in providing security in a framework manner. So one other concept that we'll talk about here is the third-party governance. And this is really where the security organization has to have oversight of the systems owned by the organization. And not just that, but they also have to have oversight of the third parties that are used as part of doing the normal operating business of the organization. So this means that any of the services that are provided externally to the organization, any of the software that's being used by the organization, that could be SaaS offerings, it could be something that's being internally deployed within the organization. The security organization has to know what those different, what the security posture is of those third-party partners that they're working with. And not that the security organization is working with, but the broader business is working with. It's not uncommon for the business to use a lot of different partners, and those partners could be taking or could be integrating data from the business, or could be using services from the business, and you want to make sure that the security is properly adhered to within that third party. And typically how this is done is through audits. And so the security organization will perform some type of a third party risk assessment. And what that really means is it could be something as formal as a full audit, or it could be a questionnaire. It could be a couple meetings to discuss security. But the bottom line is that the security organization is responsible for the risk of the overall business, meaning that also includes the third party services that are used by the business. So one other thing we'll talk about here is due diligence, due care. And with due diligence, we're talking about protecting the organization through planning, policy, and process, whereas due care is practicing activities that maintain the due diligence effort. So just to wrap this up, one example here is a formal security program that's been implemented within an organization. That's an example of due diligence, where the application of that program is due care. So in other words, you might create that overall roadmap or that overall picture of what the security program looks like, but the actual doing of that program, the implementation part of it, the implementing of tools and monitoring and things like that, are the due care parts of the due diligence. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this part, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you.